In the pine-scented stillness of Prescott, Arizona, nestled on a quiet street with manicured lawns and wind chimes singing in the breeze, stood a modest home, 2 stories tall, beige siding, white shutters. Nothing about it demanded attention, and that was exactly how the Fisher family seemed to like it. Robert Fisher was a man of structure. A former Navy veteran turned firefighter, he carried himself with the rigid precision of someone trained to follow orders and to give them. Broad-shouldered, tight-lipped, and unyielding, Robert was the kind of man who woke before sunrise, mowed the lawn on Saturdays, and said grace before dinner. To neighbors, he was polite, if distant. A family man, some said. A traditionalist, said others. Some whispered he was too stern, too controlling. But no one ever said it to his face. His wife, Mary, was his opposite in nearly every way. Where Robert was silent, Mary was soft-spoken. Where he was stoic, she was serene. She wore her kindness like a second skin. Always the first to offer help, the last to judge. Mary ran the household with the quiet grace of someone who believed deeply in duty, faith, and family. Church on Sundays, volunteering midweek, always a fresh casserole in the freezer for a neighbor in need. They had 2 children, Brittany, 12, a gentle soul with a love for reading and journaling, and Bobby Jr., 10, who loved goofing around in the yard, throwing footballs, and mimicking his dad's firefighter stories. They were polite kids, well-behaved, and deeply loved by their mother. To anyone on Ridgecrest Drive, the Fishers were a picture of American family values. Quiet, private, respectable. But behind the walls of that home, things were not so simple. Robert, it was said, didn't smile much. He had a temper, one that simmered rather than boiled. Mary's friends noticed she flinched sometimes when her name was called too sharply. Some days she seemed tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix, but a bone-deep weariness. There were whispers, of course. Rumors that Robert had once threatened to leave her, that he didn't approve of how she raised the kids, that things were tense. But in suburban life, people rarely dig too deep. As long as the lawn is cut and the kids show up to school on time, most questions go unasked. And so, the Fishers carried on, a family like any other. Church, school, work, repeat. Until one morning in early April 2001, the house fell silent. Not the usual morning quiet, but a haunting, unnatural silence. No dog barking, no kids laughing, no car pulling out of the driveway. Just nothing. It was as if the entire family had vanished overnight. Neighbors started to notice. Newspapers left untouched. The front light stayed on too long. The mailbox overflowed. And then, on April 10th, a deafening explosion shattered the quiet. Robert and Mary Fisher's home was consumed by fire. Flames tore through the windows. The roof collapsed. Smoke curled into the Arizona sky. Firefighters rushed to the scene, Robert's former colleagues, only to find something far more chilling than a burning home. Inside the smoldering wreckage, beneath charred wood and collapsed beams, they discovered 3 bodies: Mary, Brittany, Bobby Jr., all dead. But Robert, gone. And so the mystery began. In the weeks before that fateful April morning, the Fishers seemed, on the surface, to be living their usual lives. But beneath the calm, subtle ripples of unease began to stir, the kind you only notice in hindsight. Robert, the unshakable patriarch, had been acting strangely. Neighbors recalled seeing him pacing the driveway late at night, eyes darting nervously, phone pressed tightly to his ear. Mary's friends whispered about missed church meetings and canceled plans. Brittany hadn't been herself at school, quieter, distracted, withdrawn from friends she once adored. The local mailman remembered a day when no one came to the door, not even the children who usually raced to greet him. And then, a few days before the fire, a neighbor overheard a heated argument through thin walls. Voices raised, something breaking in the background, a slammed door, but no one stepped inside. No one asked too many questions. And Robert? He stopped answering his phone. On April 5th, just days before the tragedy, Robert told a co-worker he was taking some time off. A family emergency, he said. No further explanation. Mary was last seen alive the next morning, leaving the grocery store with 2 overflowing bags, smiling weakly at a passing acquaintance. Brittany and Bobby Jr. were last seen waiting for their school bus, waving goodbye with hopeful faces, faces that would never return home. Unsettling messages began to surface, cryptic texts sent to Mary's phone, then deleted. A voicemail on Robert's answering machine, full of static and a man's low, threatening voice. An anonymous tip to the police about strange comings and goings at the Fisher residence. But no one could have predicted the storm that was about to break. And on the night of April 9th, Ridgecrest Drive went dark. No lights flickered behind the Fisher windows. No footsteps echoed on the porch. Just silence. The next morning, neighbors awoke to the smell of smoke, flames devouring the Fisher home, and with it, the last hope of answers.
When the first fire engines screamed down Ridgecrest Drive that chilly April morning, neighbors gathered behind yellow police tape, their faces etched with disbelief and fear. Flames hungrily consumed the Fisher family home, sending plumes of smoke spiraling into the clear Arizona sky, a fiery beacon signaling tragedy. Among the firefighters was a man who knew the house, Robert's old colleague, Tom Harris. His hands trembled as he helped battle the blaze, knowing that behind those burning walls lay the life he once called a friend. Hours later, as the flames died down and smoke turned to ash, investigators moved in. What they found defied logic. Brittany, Mary, and Bobby Jr., their bodies cold and lifeless beneath the rubble, victims of a horrific crime wrapped in fire. But Robert, he was nowhere to be found. Detectives combed the charred wreckage for clues. Burn patterns told stories of violence. Accelerants poured, doors barricaded from the inside, windows shattered by force. In the ash, pieces of a shattered family portrait lay scattered, a haunting symbol of what had been lost. Then came the first breakthrough. A security camera across the street, damaged but salvageable. Its grainy footage revealed a shadowy figure moving around the Fisher home the night before the fire. Tall, determined, silent. Witnesses came forward, nervously recounting strange sightings. A black sedan parked nearby for hours. A man in a dark coat knocking on doors late at night. Unanswered calls to the family's phone. Forensic experts uncovered fingerprints smeared in soot and blood, strange fibers caught on broken glass, and the faint scent of gasoline on Robert's worn leather jacket. Each piece of evidence chipped away at the illusion of a peaceful family tragedy, exposing something far more sinister, a web of secrets, lies, and possibly a murderer in their midst. The search for Robert Fisher intensified. Was he a victim? Or something else entirely? As the sun set over Prescott that day, a chilling question hung in the air. What really happened inside that burning house? With the Fisher family shattered and their home reduced to ashes, suspicion quickly turned toward the one missing piece of the puzzle, Robert Fisher himself. To some, he was the grieving father, a man devastated by loss, but to others, a man hiding behind a mask of sorrow, his silence speaking louder than words. Robert's reputation was complicated. Behind the stoic facade lurked a tempest of secrets few knew. His past relationships were strained, filled with rumors of manipulation and control. Friends recalled his relentless temper, a man who demanded obedience and punished disobedience. Neighbors whispered about the locked basement door, the late-night phone calls filled with anger and threats. But Robert wasn't alone in this tangled web. There was Lisa Caldwell, Mary's sister, who openly clashed with Robert over the family's finances and Mary's increasing withdrawal. Known for her sharp tongue and fierce loyalty to her sister, Some wondered if bitter resentment had crossed into something darker. Then there was Michael Stevens, Robert's former business partner, whose sudden departure from their joint venture months earlier raised questions. And old grudges boiled over. Michael had a reputation for recklessness and a temper that matched Robert's. Even Brittany's school counselor noted troubling behavior, not just in the children, but in the family dynamics. Reports of arguments overheard, bruises hidden beneath clothing, a household ruled by fear rather than love. Slowly, the investigators began to peel back layers of this family's private life. Each suspect, a piece of a fractured mirror reflecting anger, betrayal, and pain. Robert Fisher, the missing patriarch, a man whose carefully controlled world was crumbling. Was he protector or predator? Lisa Caldwell, the sister whose love for family was shadowed by animosity toward Robert. Michael Stevens, the disgruntled former partner with a motive hidden beneath financial losses. And beyond them, shadows of others, old friends, acquaintances, neighbors, each with secrets, each a potential key to unlocking the truth. The investigation was no longer just about a fire or a missing man. It was about unraveling the tangled motives behind a family's destruction. The smoke had barely settled over Ridgecrest Drive when the Prescott Police Department launched their most intense investigation in years. Detectives moved with deliberate precision, canvassing neighborhoods, poring over forensic reports, and chasing every whisper of a lead. Days turned into weeks. The house was gone, but the story was far from over. Inside the precinct, Detective Laura Bennett stood at the helm. Methodical and relentless, she knew this case was a puzzle of human emotions as much as physical evidence. Every detail mattered. A misplaced footprint, a forgotten voicemail, a glance caught on security footage. Early interviews with neighbors painted a picture of unease. Late-night visitors, strange noises, arguments carried on the wind. Some described Robert as a man pushed to the edge. Others saw a victim of circumstance. Then came the forensic breakthroughs. Blood spatter analysis suggested a struggle. The accelerant pattern told a story of premeditation. The fibers found at the scene were traced back to a rare kind of rope, one Robert had purchased months earlier, according to store receipts. Security footage revealed that shadowy figure from the night of the fire was not alone. A second figure emerged, smaller, quicker, captured fleetingly in the background. Could there have been an accomplice? The detectives delved into Robert's digital life. His emails were meticulously combed, revealing a growing tension with Lisa Caldwell, punctuated by angry exchanges and veiled threats. Financial records showed a trail of questionable transactions linked to Michael Stevens, hinting at deeper conflicts than anyone imagined. But progress wasn't linear. Dead ends and false leads frustrated the team. Witnesses changed stories. Evidence seemed to vanish like smoke in the wind. Then the phone rang. An anonymous tip led investigators to a remote cabin in the neighboring forest. Inside, they discovered Robert's battered truck, keys still in the ignition, but no sign of the man himself. More disturbingly, they found signs of a recent struggle. Overturned furniture, bloodstains, and a cryptic note scrawled on the wall. Justice will be served. The investigation had morphed into a desperate manhunt. Was Robert Fisher a fugitive, a victim, or something far more dangerous? The answers were buried deep in a labyrinth of secrets, and each discovery only deepened the mystery. Weeks of relentless searching had worn down the community and the detectives alike. Every lead had been chased, every shadow scrutinized. And then, on a rain-slicked evening, the breakthrough came. A tip from an informant, someone close to the case but long silent, pointed authorities to a forgotten trailer park miles outside Prescott. The place was a rusted maze of trailers and overgrown weeds, a far cry from the neat streets where the Fishers once lived. Under the cover of darkness, Detective Bennett and a team of officers moved in. Inside one of the trailers, battered and haggard, sat Robert Fisher. His eyes, once sharp and commanding, were dulled by exhaustion and fear, his clothes torn, his hands marked with bruises and cuts, a man worn down by weeks on the run. The arrest was quiet but heavy. No struggle, no words. Robert was taken into custody, and the storm that had gripped Prescott began to settle into something more tangible, the wheels of justice turning. In interrogation rooms thick with tension, Robert remained guarded. His story twisted between denial and vague admissions, his voice a low murmur that hinted at truths withheld. For the first time, the detectives glimpsed the man behind the missing father facade, a man tangled in a web of anger, fear, and desperation. The evidence, now mounting, painted a chilling portrait. From the calculated arson to the brutal murders, the case against Robert was overwhelming, but the question that haunted everyone was still unanswered. What had driven him to destroy his own family? As the community grappled with the horror, the trial loomed, the final act in a tragedy none could forget. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation and grief as the people of Prescott gathered to witness the trial that would finally unravel the Fisher family's darkest secret. Robert Fisher sat at the defendant's table, his face a mask of stoicism that barely concealed the storm raging beneath. Across from him, prosecutors laid out a devastating case, a mosaic of forensic evidence, witness testimony, and digital footprints that traced the final days of a family shattered by violence. The prosecution painted Robert as a man consumed by control, whose simmering rage erupted in the most horrific way imaginable. They recounted the acrimonious exchanges with his sister-in-law, Lisa Caldwell, the financial disputes with Michael Stevens, and the chilling text messages sent to Mary in the days before the fire. But the defense pushed back, weaving a narrative of a broken man haunted by personal demons and mounting pressure. They argued that Robert was a victim of circumstance, that someone else had orchestrated the crime to frame him, a shadowy accomplice who vanished into the night. Days of testimony bled into weeks. Emotional testimonies from neighbors, friends, and school counselors laid bare the fractures within the Fisher household. The whispered arguments, the hidden bruises, the desperate pleas for help that went unheard. Expert witnesses walked the court through the forensic labyrinth, explaining blood spatter patterns, accelerant detection, and the significance of the fibers found at the scene. Each piece of evidence chipped away at the doubt. Then came the closing arguments, a battle of wills and words, laying bare the heart of the case. When the jury finally retired to deliberate, the courtroom held its breath. After hours that felt like an eternity, they returned, guilty. Robert Fisher was convicted of the murders of his wife and children and the arson that consumed their home. Justice, however imperfect, had been served. The verdict sent ripples through Prescott. Relief for some, heartbreak for others. The Fisher tragedy had left scars that would never fully heal. Mary, Brittany, and Bobby Jr. were gone, but their memories lingered in the quiet corners of the town, in the school halls where Brittany once giggled with friends, in the church pews where Mary's voice led hymns, in the parks where Bobby Jr. chased a football under the sun. For the community, healing began in small ways. Candlelight vigils, memorial gardens planted in their honor, fundraisers to support families affected by domestic violence and abuse. Their story became a somber call to awareness, a stark reminder that behind closed doors, darkness can fester unseen. Mary's sister, Lisa Caldwell, took up the mantle of advocacy, working tirelessly to bring light to victims silenced by fear. The neighborhood slowly knitted itself back together, forever changed, but determined to remember. Detective Laura Bennett, who had led the investigation from the start, reflected quietly on the cost of justice. The case had tested her limits, but also reaffirmed her resolve to uncover the truth no matter how painful. And Robert Fisher, now behind bars, carried with him the weight of his actions. A man whose choices destroyed a family, a community, and his own future. In the end, the Fisher family's story is more than a chilling mystery. It is a mirror held up to society's failures, the complexities of human nature, and the urgent need for vigilance, compassion, and support for those living in silence. Their legacy is a call to action, to listen more closely, to intervene earlier, and to never ignore the quiet signs of trouble. Because sometimes the greatest mysteries hide in plain sight, until the flames reveal the truth. As we close the chapter on the tragic story of the Fisher family, it's impossible not to reflect on the hidden struggles so many endure behind closed doors. Abuse, fear, and silence often build invisible walls, walls that can only be torn down through awareness, empathy, and action. If this story has moved you, remember, every neighborhood, every community holds untold stories. You might be the one to notice the quiet cries for help, the missed appointments, the sudden changes in behavior, the unexplained bruises. Reach out, listen without judgment, support those who may feel trapped or voiceless, whether it's a friend, a family member, or even a stranger. Your intervention could be the lifeline that changes a life. We urge you to educate yourself about domestic abuse and mental health, to support local organizations that work tirelessly to protect victims, and to advocate for stronger community resources. Because when we act together, when we refuse to look away, we can prevent tragedies like the Fisher families from happening again. Let their story be not just a haunting memory, but a catalyst for change. Thank you for joining us in seeking the truth and in honoring the lives lost.